If you're not used to processing vocals or mixing so early on in your music career, you may try all of these techniques and still find that you're not getting the vocal sound you want. Quite often I hear people saying that they just can't quite get that sort of massive, clear, polished sound that the pro tracks have. But here's the thing, getting a great vocal mix is only 50% working on the vocal itself and 50% getting your track mixed properly and creating space in your mix for the vocal. Now, I've shown you many of the techniques and tricks in which you can get that big sound you're after. But 9 times out of 10, when someone sends me a track to review, the vocal sound is great if you listen to just the vocal. But what you quite often get is 2 or 3 other elements also trying to occupy the same space as the vocal. So you could have the most awesome and polished vocal in the world, but if you have other elements of the track trying to shout over the top or at the same time and place, then it will detract from the vocal. Just remember that the more you have going on, the smaller the vocal will sound in the mix, and the less elements you have, the bigger the vocal will sound. What can help is making sure you treat the vocal as the main part, like the main star in a play, and all the other actors and all the props are there just to enhance and frame the main performance. They're not there to take over and steal the glory. It would just ruin the play. So if you can think about the vocal like that the vocal should take center stage and all else in the mix should help enhance the vocal and not steal its glory, then I guarantee you will start making better mixes just from changing the way you see how the elements of the mix work together. It's all very well and good making everything in the mix sound awesome on its own, but then you get a mix that sounds like a bunch of squabbling children all shouting for attention. That does not mean that you can't have a banging drum sequence and a fat bass line. These indeed can enhance the vocal and vice versa, but there is always a balance to be struck. And if something is conflicting with the main vocal or whatever you've picked as the main element of your track, then change it as soon as possible or just lose it. Be direct and decisive in your mixing. Now, I have a much more in-depth look at this ethos and approach to mixing in the skill sets mixing tutorial. And as we're concerned solely with the vocal here, I'll just show you a couple of extra automation tricks to help the vocal pop more in certain parts of the track. So I'll go back to this track. Look out through your own eyes and tell me how you feel. The pain and all your suffering is the same pain that I feel. I am animal. And at the moment, the verse vocals and the chorus vocals all going through the same processes. There's no difference in them at all, processing-wise. And the only thing that's helping these vocals in the chorus just stand out a little bit more is the fact that it's got these doubles on there as well. So what if I want to make that pop even more compared to the verse vocal? So what I can do is start automating things. Now I can automate the compressor, which I'll do now. So if I bring down my automation, go to my compressor, and I want to just change the 2 things actually, the threshold first. And I just want to set the point where I want that to start. So that's just as the main vocal take is starting. So I'll set my first point there because I don't want to affect anything else other than just this vocal, and set my end point. And then I can lower the threshold here. And I can also automate the ratio as well to make it a harder compression. Again, set my start and end points. And then I'll raise the ratio up there so it's compressing it even harder. Let's have a bit more extreme than that. But of course, what I've done there is basically reduce the overall volume. So I do need to turn the compressor up. So again, I'll just have another automation track just for the makeup gain, which again, I need to automate in exactly the same spots. The same pain that I feel, I am animal. Same pain that I feel.
animal.
So yes, that has definitely made it pop a bit more. It's just brought it forward in the mix. But unfortunately, it's brought forward those breaths as well. So I can just simply select those breaths. And just bring the volume of those right down so they're not being affected by the compressor so much.
I am animal. Look out through your own eyes and tell me how you feel. The pain and all your suffering is the same pain that I feel. I am animal. I am animal.
And there you go. So that's just brought them slightly forward in the mix. Now, another thing I can do to bring them even further forward in the mix is automate the reverb that's on that group. And I do that, of course, by automating the sends, and the reverb's on send 1. So I'll just change the level of the send, or automate the level of the send. And I'm just going to make that less. So basically, I'm just applying less reverb to this whole group in the chorus.
Pain and all your suffering is the same pain that I feel. I am animal. I am animal.
So these are quite subtle effects, but they really can just help your vocal just pop just that little bit more. And combined with the other techniques that I've shown you to bring the vocals forward in the mix, just having something like this just to make them pop slightly more in comparison to the other vocals, things can be made relatively more forwards.
Pain and all your suffering is the same pain that I feel. I am animal.
So there's two ways you can use automation to bring the vocal forwards within the mix. Another tip you can do, if you've got your compressor on the main vocal group and you're sending through your verse and chorus vocals to that, you can actually automate just the volume of the verse vocal, which will in effect make the compressor less effective on that track. And it just helps tone down the vocal compression in the verses where you might want greater dynamics. And it just gives the verse a bit more contrast to the chorus. So when the chorus comes in, it basically means it has more impact. So one last tip for mixing your vocals when it actually comes to the mix down and you're mixing your whole track. So what you can do with the vocal EQ, so I've got my vocal EQ curves all there. Now on this track, I've got everything apart from the kick, the sub, and the vocal routed through to the pre-out group.
Animal. I am animal.
That was partially so I could EQ out any sub that's in the rest of the track, because I want to keep the sub channel completely clear for the kick and the sub bass. So what I can also do to help the vocal cut through the mix is add an EQ to this, and then mirror the EQ that I've got on my vocal channel, but dipping instead of boosting. So that will just have the effects of just clearing up some of those frequencies, so opening up a little bit more space in the mix for the vocals.
I am animal.
Now that's very subtle, but when I actually unbypass this, you can actually hear the vocals just jump out just a little bit more, and they just become a little bit cleaner. So you don't have to have routed every single thing through to one group, but it is quite beneficial sometimes. If you've got a track that's quite heavy on vocals like this one, then you can not only take out things for the vocal frequency, but of course you can also do what I showed you before and take out like the bass frequencies, just so you can leave the channel completely clear for any sub coming from the kick and the bass, which will really help tidy up your mix as well. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you have learned a lot. Get stuck in and happy producing.